Hi, everybody. I want to tell you about one of my favorite passages in Scripture. So I'm going to read you a couple verses from it, and that is Galatians chapter 6, and I'm going to start at verse 9. And it says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers." So Galatians was written by the Apostle Paul. And in chapter 6, he's talking about doing good for people and doing good to people, helping people and being kind. But he's also talking about our relationships with people and making sure that other people are doing good. And if they're doing bad, holding them accountable and helping them get back on the right path. And that means your friends and your classmates, but not just them, maybe even strangers and people that you haven't met yet that you'll meet later on. Paul's talking about making sure that you do good for them and you help them and you're kind to them, but also making sure that they're doing good and help them to do good and help them to be kind to other people and do good things for other people. But then in verse 9, Paul says, let us not become weary in doing good. So, what he means is don't become tired of doing good because it is easy sometimes to get tired of doing good or forget why you're doing good. Um, but Paul says don't give up. He says at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up. And what he means there is after this life, in heaven, uh, all the good that you've done will pay off. But then he says, when we have the opportunity, let us do good for all people, and especially those who belong to the family of believers. So, what Paul means there, in the beginning, he says to all people, so everyone. Some people are not as easy to do good for as others, and some people are not as easy to be kind to as others. Some people are mean. Some people are not nice, and when someone isn't nice to you, it's not quite as easy to be nice to them as it is to be nice to, say, your friend who's always nice to you. But Paul says, do good for all people, help all people. But then he says, especially those who belong to the family of believers. And that's important. He means by that not to do better to believers, not don't do more good for your fellow believers, for Christians, than other people, and don't be better to Christians than everyone else. But what he means there is understand what your fellow Christians, your fellow believers, understand what they're going through because you're a Christian yourself and you can relate to them. When Paul wrote Galatians, it was a difficult time in history to be a Christian. He wrote Galatians shortly after Jesus Christ died. And so Christians in that time generally didn't have as much money as other people did. It was harder to get as good of a job uh, as other people had. They generally didn't have as many possessions as other people did. Um, and people were just mean to them. People were not very accepting at that time of Christians, and especially Paul. Paul was treated very poorly for being a Christian and trying to teach other people and show other people the teachings of Jesus. And so he's saying these your fellow Christians who are having a hard time with being Christians and doing good for other people because of the way that everyone else treats them for being a Christian, he says, understand what they're going through and help them to do better and do good for them because you understand what they need because they're like you. And it's similar today. Sometimes people are not nice to you about being a Christian. Uh, and sometimes the good thing to do isn't the cool thing to do. And sometimes the good thing to do doesn't seem like it's the most fun thing to do. And sometimes people don't want you to do the good thing. And you understand that. So you understand what your fellow Christians are going through as well. And what Paul's saying there is see that in other people. See what your fellow Christians are going through and help them to do good and do good for them. But in general, do good for everyone and don't become tired of it. Because if you don't give up, one day you will reap a harvest for all the good you've done.